He was rowing when he got the news that he'd been selected to go to Antarctica, which he went because they had a geologist lined up called Gregory, and he dropped out when he realised that it wasn't going to be his expedition with the Navy taking him where he wanted to go. It was going to be a naval expedition with Scott in charge, and he would not have the say that he thought he would have. So they took my grandfather instead as the geologist, fresh out of Cambridge, with no reputation to lose at that point. And that's him. These are the scientific personnel of Discovery. And this was the first sledging expedition from Discovery, which went out to White Island. Again, some of the findings of the first geologist in Antarctica. My talk is titled Paths Are Made by Walking because he walked. He was the first person to have walked in lots of those places. I didn't find out until I got back to Christchurch after having been in Antarctica that he was the first chap up Observation Hill, Ob Hill as it's known, and built the cairn, which is not visible in this picture, but the ship's, one of the cooks, called Duncan, recorded that Mr. Ferrer was the first up and built the cairn. And they made cartoons of each other. And there he is with the Morning, the crew of the Morning, the relief ship that came halfway through. And then this Wapping Great Glacier was named after him. The bit of red on this side is a bit of the plane that Charles Swithenbank was flying. I was very fortunate that Charles Swithenbank, before I went to Antarctica, I went to his house and he spread out all these maps to try and give me some sense of the scale of the place, which I still haven't got, because when I think now about where I was, in a tiny, obviously tiny little place, in a place called Windless Bight, Ross Island has got the peninsula going to the south called Hut Peninsula. The Hut is right at the end. Windless Bight is near it. McMurdo is on there, and the Scott Base is on there, and the rest of the island is really quite big, but it looks tiny on maps because Antarctica is huge. Examples here. The first plant evidence, fossilised plants. He found gold in Antarctica, silver, and coal, amongst other things. A rock that he took back in 1905 was split in 1928 to discover Glossopteris, which kind of clinched the thing about continental drift, because the same plant is there in Africa, South America, India. And this, his sketchbook, which I opened in the Scott Polar, and it smelt of the ice. I don't know if anybody had opened it in between, but this just smelt of the ice. And if anybody comes up with enough money for me to make a film, it will start with this and then fade into that actual view, which is still the same. Just told you about that, didn't I? This is an example of just the detailed work that he did. He made lots of maps of Northland which show really precise details on it, like where paths were and where there were cesium mines and things like this. And the archaeologists in Northland are using them now. My brother went up to a lecture in Kerry about the maps and how very useful they still are because they're so detailed and accurate. His further career. And my granny. I think there's a bit later of my granny than of him, probably. So he did his soil surveys in Central Otago. Again, my brother wrote to Dunedin. They were asking for ideas for street naming. So we sent in my grandfather's name, and they wrote back and said, what did he do? And we said that he worked on soil improvement. Well, the chap in the Dunedin office looked him up and found that he'd got his doctorate precisely for soil improvement in Central Otago. So I wrote back and said, do you think the wine and fruit industries of Central Otago should be grateful to him? And he wrote back saying, yeah, we owe him all sorts of gratitude, those two particular industries. So that's rather nice. But, yeah, sadly he didn't live very long after getting his doctorate. Rutherford wrote to him and congratulated him. I've got a photograph of a letter that Mawson wrote to him as well. So he knew all those people, and his funeral was a big funeral, and then some climbers named the peak next to Cloudy Peak after him. They thought that they were climbing Cloudy Peak. When they got to the top, they realised they weren't, and they asked if they could name it the peak that they were on for H.T. Ferrer, and they did. They were allowed to do that. And that's just a bit before he died. Probably. And these are all the people I owe a debt of gratitude for this particular bit of research and being able to be there in Antarctica. That's those people. Those people then, of course, since then I've built up much more debts of gratitude to many more people. Oh, this one. At the SCAR conference in 2016, there were two artworks. It's a scientific conference, but there were two artworks as well, because Antarctica, under the treaty, is set aside for science, peaceful purposes. So the arts are just as much allowed to be there as the sciences. And this was a piece of work that I did, which is a big poster, about the width of that window and, you know, the classic shape. And I've written on the sails, "Oh scientists, take art to your bosom." And I've offered that to the head of BAS, the British Antarctic Survey, because they've got a wonderful sort of well in their building and it would look really good there. But I met her and she said, yes please, and then I've emailed her a couple of times and nothing's happened. So if any of you have got any other ideas about what to do with this big poster addressing scientists to please take art on board, that would be useful. And the other piece of art shown at the SCAR conference was a map of Antarctica with all the place names only of the places that were named after women, of which there are a considerable number. Victoria Land and Daly Land, Maud Island, all of it, lots of them. And talking of which, in 2011-12, which was before the SCAR conference that I did that presentation for, I went to Antarctica with the postgraduate Certificate of Antarctic Studies course, number 14, at the University of Canterbury. It doesn't any longer offer people 10 days on the ice, but when I went, you got 10 days on the ice thrown in. And you can see it's terribly grueling and cold and awful. But no, it was like that. That was the Ross Ice Shelf then. We got very hot. That's 3 of my classmates. They were all already a lot younger, nearly 60 then when I did that. And the flag you can see in this picture is the original flag put up by the Discovery Expedition in 1901-4. And what I'm doing is I'm playing my violin. I belong to a group in London called the Cross-Dress String Quartet. And I got the idea because I saw a friend of mine dressed as a woman, and for a while I didn't recognise him, and he was playing bass guitar, and I thought, oh, I want to play. So we started the cross-dress string quartet, and the cross-dress string quartet can be any number of people. It's quite often 4, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 6, and on this occasion it was 1. And this was me at Scott Bass wearing a Father Christmas beard and a jacket from the very comprehensive dressing up room that they have at the Scott Bass. And I'm playing free improvised music there. We did a little review. The PCAS course, Postgraduate Certificate Antarctic Studies course, we did a little review for the permanent people who lived at Scott Bass at that time. And then this is a film of me playing my violin in the Discovery Hut during that time. This is December 2011. And I didn't realise then how much time the Ross Sea party had spent there too. So this is getting up close and personal with the Discovery Hut. And I might do a duet with it, depending on how the sound is. As it turns off. Okay, so the speaker's gone to sleep. Oh, thank you. There's a conversation about puppies going on.
Were they all right? Were the puppies all right?
I'll leave it rolling, just do the Bluetooth thing. I know it won't keep rolling. Okay. Off on again? It is JBL wind, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Turn the volume control. Doesn't seem to have paired it like that. Doesn't seem to have found its paired up for that. And the whole Bluetooth thing.
When to do it?
It doesn't seem to connect it. Sorry. Stupid, she's talking on my phone here.
It's still got your phone in it. Well, you've got the choice of free improvised music and the Discovery Hut. I'm going to give you excuse on this stuff, and I might join in with it too. I use the violin as a kind of antenna. It tells me what I'm feeling and what I'm looking at. What's going on? I ask the violin and it tells me. What I was most afraid of in the Discovery Hut was that I wouldn't be grounded enough to experience it. That I'd be so kind of keyed up, excited about being there and everything like that, that I wouldn't just settle and be there. Oh, there we go, it says it's connected now. Thank you.
Click on that just to make sure it does.
Sorry? Click on that?
Click on that for JBL and another signal.
Oh, click on JBL again. It was blue a moment ago. So yes, if I had to take 2 kilos of my possessions, it probably would be the violin. I don't think it's playing ball to you. What do you think?
It worked yesterday, of course.
Sorry?
It worked yesterday, of course.
Yeah, it did work yesterday. We came and tested it all on Wednesday and it was working brilliantly.
Just turn it off and on again.
Okay.
Just turn the phone off. That's what we're talking about.
Does anybody else play free improvised music? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Thank you. when you start from silence and you see where it will go. It's not improvising on a theme or a melody or anything like that. It's, exploration, a tool of exploration. I did a bit of work around my other grandfather. He had 5 children, the youngest was my mother, and they all died in different places around the world. And I went to play in Western Australia, which was where he'd been working when his family was small. And I took recordings from all the grave sites and ash sites of those 5 siblings back to Western Australia and played them there where they'd all been raised. Took them all home, in a way. I had a little, that grandfather, the other grandfather, took a lot of photographs in Western Australia, and I played those on my laptop. And actually it was very interesting because there was another exhibition at the same time, which was of an Aboriginal settlement from the 1970s. And they were a bit dubious about putting me on as a kind of settler family when this was going on too. But in the end, they did decide we could do it the same day. So my laptop was running with the pictures and the sounds, and I had my violin and I was playing. And a woman came in, a young Aboriginal woman, and stood in front of a photograph. I asked her if she wanted me to stop and shut down the laptop and what have you. She said, no. She said, that's my auntie and uncle. I said, that's my auntie and uncle. So that was a beautiful moment and a use of bringing all this stuff back home. Are we going to do a band of this? Yeah.
Could you just tune up the speakers on your laptop and you can probably hear it on that?
There is a speaker on the laptop,
Yeah,
and
why don't you try that?
which might be enough. We'll just see. Oops. I'll turn it right up. But I'll join in with the other violin, or I'll turn it down and waffle on some more. This is a conversation going on behind the curtain, so it's actually very muffled. Oops. There we go.
Were they all right? Were the puppies all right?
down this sound because if you're not used to free improvisation, that's enough one go. And I'm going to play you some of the other tunes that I played in the Discovery Hut. And I thought there would never have been any Yiddish tunes there before, so I started with some Yiddish tunes. No, that's not how it goes. The film stops on that wonderful piece of cloth shortly. We'll be here in aging again.
Susanna, if I may say so, that very much picks up the mood of the Rossi party here. I'm that up too.
Well, that's what I wanted. Yes, I thought last night I need to play with it to bring the Ross Tea Party into the hut as well. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really glad you caught that. It's marvellous.
Can you just tell me or tell us the significance of the cloth?
There's a coat hanging up. There were clothes hanging up there and sheets of. Yeah, this is a jacket here. It's the most marvellous weave, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just.
So those are all sort of preserved because of the environment.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the hut has been there. The men of Discovery built it in 1902, and it's been there ever since. I met Baden Norris when I was doing the PCAS course in 11-12, and he was the curator of the Littleton Museum, and he worked in Antarctica in the 60s. He was supposed to be catching a plane out from Williams Field and, in the 60s, and it was delayed. So he and another New Zealander, they climbed up onto the top bunk, of course. 3 bunks, they were, 3-level bunks. And they were just resting there, waiting for their plane. And a couple of Americans came in, and one of them said, because the Americans were building McMurdo at that point, the Americans came in, and one said to the other, I've been offered a free pass home if I let a bulldozer get out of control in the direction of that hut. Well, the New Zealanders just lay doggo, but when he got back home, he went and told the government that this was on the cards, and then moves were put in to preserve, well, this hut, and I suppose the other huts, which are sort of more important, but not more important in terms of survival. This hut contributed more to people's survival than any of the others, I think. Well, I don't know. That's a very gross statement, but looking at you when I'm saying that.
You're right.
Oh, thank you.
In Admiral Dufek in 1964, I think it was,
Yes.
declared this hut a shrine, to be treated as a shrine. A
Treated
shrine.
it as a...
Shrine. Admiral Dufek in 1964 declared that this hut should be treated as a shrine. And that's set the
Yeah,
conservation
that's
criteria
yeah,
ever
yeah.
since.
yeah. Well, Baden Norris told me that he had trained as an archaeologist, so he told the shed was full of ice. The hut was full of ice. And he tunnelled into the middle, up through the middle of the ice, and he took things off and mapped where they all were in the ice. Funneled it all back down and out. Yeah, it's an extraordinary story. And, yes, my fellow student, his name's Sandy Chang, but this is how he likes to be known. Now, this is the furthest south building for worship. This is the Chapel of the Snows, which is at the McMurdo base, the American base. And they do have a chaplain there. But on Christmas Day, it wasn't possible for me to get there. It's a bit closer. And if I'm lucky, the next slide will be the window. There we are. Beautiful window. The little penguin at the top. And then this was my altar on Christmas Day in 2011. I wanted to take communion on Christmas Day, and when I asked about it, I was told that I was the only person in 14 years that had asked that. And they didn't know how I could do that. They didn't think I'd be able to get to the Chapel of the Snows on Christmas Day, you know, busy schedule and all that. So I asked the vicar of the church I was going to at the time if he could lend me a pyx with some consecrated host in that I could take down, like home communion, like people take home communion. And he ummed and ahed a bit, and he wasn't really quite sure, oh, I don't know what the bishop would say about that, you know. So I thought, oh, well, I don't know what to do about this. So I went to another priest, and I went to a chap who's dead now, Father Ron Smith, and he was actually the brother-in-law of someone who was a priest at my church, the church I went to in London, Father Graham Watson. Father Ron Smith married Graham Watson's sister, Diane, and she's still alive. And I did write to her and ask if I could borrow this pyx to show you, but she said that before he died, Father Ron had given all his stuff to theological students, as is entirely good and correct. So this pyx is not available to show you. The little red cloth is the cloth that we always had around our Christmas tree at home, and which I could have brought, but I couldn't find it just as I was leaving there. And the Bible was, I won that when I was 13 in Pathfinders for knowing all the books of the Bible. So that's my Bible. And I don't know if you can see, there's the edges of the block of snow, but it's a sort of about that big block of snow. Snow is the most wonderful building material. You can just dig it out and lift it out and plonk it on another bit and it just stays there. It's very unmessy, it's very light and easy, and it sticks beautifully together. And you can make anything with it, really. Well, buildings, building-wise. So that was my altar. Now, the only person that wanted to share communion with me that day was this fellow student, Sandy, who did the film of me, and he told me that he hadn't even been baptised. So I thought of Philip and the eunuch, and I thought, do you want me to baptise you? And he said, no, I'll wait till I get back to Christchurch. So then I thought, can I share communion with him? And I thought, well, I can't not. So we shared communion. had one wafer in it which we split, and it had the wine already sprinkled on it, and it was blessed. And it was marvellous to feel that we were operating on New Zealand time, so we were the first, and we were right at the bottom of the world. And communion taking you into the Eucharist, taking you into timelessness anyway, I felt very much a very strong sense of the wholeness of the planet and the way that we all got to eat, all of us, we've got to eat. The pigs also set off the alarms in the security gate before I got on the plane. So that's quite fun too. And again, this is this sort of like, am I allowed to do that thing? Because the security guards wanted me to open it and show them what was in it. And I thought, is it all right to open it? And anyway, I did. I opened it and showed him. But I mean, like my violin, for example, it's a superstition. I don't like opening the case without playing something. So I haven't done it recently because they always open it when you cross a border. I have to pick that up again, actually. I have to play them a tune, start playing them a tune at security. Or maybe not a tune, maybe something else. So I think that's my last slide. Yes. And in fact, I'll go back to that because it's nice. Just to put it up there. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to say?
I have a question.
Yeah.
We know that Inuit people in the northern hemisphere build their shelters from ice.
Yeah.
Why didn't explorers and scientists in the southern continent
Yeah.
do the same?
Do the same.
You said it's
Yeah.
a wonderful building material.
It is.
It's safe. It's light. It's it's warm inside. All that. Why did we go with that very European model of
Yeah.
huts?
I mean, particularly huts that were built for the Australian outback. I mean, it's a very, very good question, and I don't know the answer to it. On the PCAS course, we all learnt to build ice shelters for ourselves. And my tutor, in particular, built an igloo with the help of other people. And it was about a circle like this. And like I say, wonderful stuff. You build, and then you build another circle and another circle, and you end up with a hole in the middle, and then you put a cross piece, and you have to hold it up for a moment or two, and then another cross piece, and then you fill in the little triangles. Those little triangles, when you look up, and you've got the white snow and the blue, blue, blue sky, you never see sky so blue as through the top little hole of an igloo. It's extraordinary. And I did try taking pictures of it, but it doesn't show it. You just have to look at a blue, blue sky and hold something ultra white against it, and then you'll see what that is. Yeah.
It just seems a missed opportunity.
It does, doesn't it? It does. Do you have anything to say about that, Richard?
No, I think the point is that that era of exploration and science was from the European culture.
Yeah.
And that's the point. They didn't have that knowledge of building igloos and the like.
No.
And the reality would be that to winter over in that environment, people coming from that background would require something more than just having to make do with ice and snow.
Yes, yes.
And just while I'm speaking, the date I gave you was wrong before. Dufek, Admiral Dufek of America, declared the Discovery Hut a shrine in 1947.
Oh my goodness. So that was very naughty of the Americans to talk about bulldozers in the 60s. Oh.
And while I'm speaking, you know, if I may say,
Mm.
your celebration of Holy Communion in Antarctica had a very lovely parallel with former Archdeacon Michael Brown. He was at St Mary's in Christchurch, and at the time he was the New Zealand person in charge of the ice. Sorry, the chaplain, New Zealand chaplain.
Oh yeah.
And he went to Cape Evans in 1978 by sledge, and David Harrowfield was with him as it happened. He saw the Spencer Smith dark room, took some photographs, and he recognised the significance of it from the Spencer Smith story.
Mm.
And when he returned 4 years later, he again went up to Cape Evans, and he celebrated Holy Communion in the dark room. He had a congregation of 2,
Yes.
and he set up exactly the same way that Spencer Smith set up the altar, and he even had the chalice and pattern from Spencer Smith and his vestments and stole, and he celebrated Holy Communion there, and he explained the effect of it in the very similar way that you did just then.
Oh.
And I've written that up actually in the most recent Antarctic magazine.
Oh.
And
We've got that. It's
yeah.
on the back.
So that's a very interesting recreation of the Spencer Smith use of that space as a chapel.
Yeah. I should say that I have quite tenuous connections with Spencer Smith, but they're there all the same. My mother we think she was a matron at College House. We've not yet found the evidence. And Spencer Smith's sister was, she taught deacons at College House in Christchurch. And we think they overlapped, not sure, but I think they overlapped. My other connection is that in 1999 I was out here because my cousin Jack Somerville was dying, and I came out to spend time with the family and be with him. And he was very distressed at not being able to go to Philip Gaze's funeral here, and he asked me to go in his place, which I did. So I was at Philip Gaze's funeral. And also, in 2014, I was on Shackleton's centenary voyage with a woman called Debbie Horseman, who's Spencer Smith's closest relative, and she talks about him in England as well. She sent me some stuff that she uses as well, which was informative too. Anything else?
Was it your family connection that made you really interested in doing the Antarctic?
My family connection? Well, my grandfather was on Discovery with Scott in 1901.
And that was the thing which made it really important.
That's the thing that made it important for me to get there. Yeah. And then once I got there, all sorts of other things were interesting too. Yeah. Thank you.
The idea of the shrine, I mean, I'm Australian, which was probably another one here. Mawson's hut is similar for Australians.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
the national and international significance of Mawson's hut
Yeah.
to the Australian psyche
Yes.
is quite profound. It's not quite Anzac, but almost.
Yeah.
And a similar period, so the meeting of World War I and Antarctic exploration was quite profound.
It is, isn't it? It is.
And the thing that really fascinates me about the story of Shackleton is that they left just as World War I was starting.
Yeah.
And then they went back after that extraordinary.
And it was still going
thing.
on.
And then half of them went to France and died.
They did. They did.
I mean, it was just
Yeah.
like, ah!
I know. I mean, I think Cheetham was dead within 6 weeks
Yeah.
of returning from Elephant Island. I mean, you know, you survive what was it, 8 months or something on Elephant Island? I forget whether it was 4 or 8, but anyway, it was a long time on Elephant Island.
You just have to wonder
It's bonkers, isn't it? Absolutely
how
bonkers.
this alliance of duty.
Yeah, yeah.
Very strange. But yeah, Mawson's Hut, for those
Yeah.
who don't know Mawson's
I've been in the replica of Mawson's Hut in Hobart.
significant Australian and
Yeah, yeah.
the hut there is a continuing conversation in Australia about
Yeah,
the spiritual significance of it and how Australia can maintain it and use it for the purposes that we're just looking at.
I made a piece of music there in that replica hut as well. So it was nice to do.
So we go back to duty, and my duty is to thank you.
Oh,
The thing that fascinates me is trials of walking over vast distances, Eurasia, the seamen who came round the Atlantic coast, who got across to Greenland, definitely not American, and who explored on foot, but the geologists went below the ground. And the photographers were there too. And the banjos there, and your violin recreated for us a sense of the wildness of the birds, of the amazing differences and the unexpected ones, like colour. So you've taken us on a personal journey which relates so well to the other speakers we've had with their imagery and their shared stories of family and memories. It was wonderful, and thank you very much, and I have something special.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful window. What a thing. There are a few things you might like to look at on that table. Yeah. The thing in the frame is something I made myself. Thank you. Thank you. So good. I think there's lots of food to eat up as well.